Yes, thank you. I'm Tara with TreeSisters, and I am the host for the Indigenous Wisdom for the Earth series. I'm here today with Susie, a teammate on TreeSisters. She is working with the Tree Network. And I also have Jyoti Ma and Amelia Barlow. And I'd love for you two to introduce yourselves and then tell us a little more about your project, please.
Go ahead, Amelia, I'll follow you.
Okay, my name is Amelia Barlow, and I'm sitting here and very honored to be here today. Thank you so much for the invitation. I am currently holding staff on the Sacred Territories Initiative and working in and around sacred economics as well. And I will get more into that with the presentation. So passing the staff over to Jyoti.
So some call me Jyoti Ma these days. I'm an elder walking on this path of unification. And I come to sit at the table with the most recent kind of seed that is about bringing new form or restoring form so that we can walk again on this planet Earth following the original principles of collaboration, reciprocity, heart, unity, and all life is sacred. And bringing into that, with that model, that seed, a way of restoring an economic model that is based on reciprocity and collaboration and guided by nature and the sacred. And so it is that stream that brought me to sit with these beautiful women and who you are and the way that you are guiding us back to a regenerative model of life. Thank you.
Wonderful. So with that, if it is appropriate, I would like to share screen and go ahead and present the Sacred Territories Initiative. All right, so you're going to have to tell me if you can see this. Did it come up?
It did.
Okay, perfect. All right, so again, it's an honor to be here with the TreeSisters. I have been following your work and very deeply inspired and humbled by the work that you do. And I feel that there's a lot of collaborative synergy between this platform and your missions with our mission here at the Fountain. So this is, I'm going to be presenting the Sacred Territories Initiative, which is certainly work that has been done for very, very many years, decades. This is built off of that work and certainly is not a unilateral initiative. This is a global initiative with such a beautiful ecology of partners. And so I say that with acknowledging those who have worked on this initiative before and the work that has gone into it before this initiative currently has been formed. So again, the Fountain, to Jyoti's point, is really based around creating new economic models based on reciprocity, guided by nature, and service to sacred territories, or what we will be discussing as biocultural regions. This work has been, obviously, Jyoti has been doing this work for quite some time, and all of the partners as well. So the mission here within this initiative is Indigenous-led conservation in order to really protect these biocultural territories, key to our relationship with Mother Earth and the reestablishment of a harmonious relationship therein. And what we mean by biocultural territory, it's important to understand that these regions are not just ecological value that, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but there's such cultural value here, and I'll be discussing that. But just to define that a bit more, those biocultural territories, in the way that we understand it from the Indigenous-led perspective, is really understanding the relationship of how humans can live in relation to Mother Earth in a net positive way. And so we follow everything that we do at the Fountain. Our intention and our vision is to really follow Indigenous protocols in each one of these territories as we enter them and assist in whatever is needed in those particular territories that are very unique. So as we all know, I believe this network is pretty well educated on the critical crossroads that we're sitting on. Earth has obviously hit some pretty serious irreversible tipping points. 1 million species on the brink of extinction, and these biocultural territories are definitely disproportionately and unprecedented destruction is happening there from extractive industries. And that's driven, as we know, from exponential growth of the economic models that we're currently living within, and the misrepresentation within our governments, and the separation, this feeling of separation between ourselves and other, and ourselves and nature. And so this is a perpetual cycle that is really driving this critical crossroads. So as many people know, Indigenous territories are really holding these key ecological gems, the remaining gems on our planet. 80% of the Earth's biodiversity is within these territories. 95% of the most threatened biodiversity, as well as 77% of the world's forest carbon, is here. And by far some of the most at-risk areas on this planet, because they don't have a lot of those protection mechanisms within what we consider nation-state frameworks. There are discrepancies between these legal frameworks and economic frameworks, and what Mother Earth and the unification, this idea of unification, is really about. And so we are intending to investigate those areas and create new frameworks that will allow for the full integration at that level. And so Indigenous peoples, they've proven, obviously, as these biocultural territories are holding some of the most precious resources and precious ecologies, they're really proving to be the world's best conservationists. And so I've been working in conservation or climate solutions and ecological rights for the past 15 years. And I find that the conversation is it's so important to focus on these Indigenous peoples and what they are really intending, and follow behind their protocols, because they've proven themselves to be the best at speaking on behalf of Mother Earth, really listening in a way that is comprehensible. They're experts in animal behavior. They live within these ecosystems, and they're very much based on right relations with all relations, which make them by far the most sensitive to the real needs of these biocultural territories. And as we've discussed, they're the most at risk. Last year, we had a record number of environmental activists killed, particularly Indigenous. In 1 year, we've never seen anything quite like that. As COVID hit, we saw the unilateral dissolution of land trusts that have been on the Americas and the United States for 250 years. It's unprecedented. There's an unprecedented destruction of the Amazon going on as people are really focused on COVID, and these communities are very much under immediate threat, but are not getting the kind of exposure that is really warranted currently. So again, I say this to a demographic who is likely very well aware, but the absolute need is to protect the earth and all life. We really must follow this ecological knowledge that the Indigenous are really carrying in order to defend the most valuable assets that we currently have. So within this, a little bit about the fountain, as I mentioned previously. The vision that the fountain is really living through is a restored global economy of reciprocity inspired by nature in service to these sacred territories. So we enable these collaborations between these very seemingly disparate worlds of business, legal, finance, governance, with original principles by allowing the stakeholder, or what we call multi-stakeholder process. And within the fountain, we're really focused on 3 areas that are very much interlinked and cannot be separated in any way, which is sacred economics, sacred territories, and sacred cultures. So we have many different initiatives that are operationalizing and sort of creating work around these different areas that are allowing for their interrelation and interaction. And so some of these here, and I will also would pass it off to Jyoti to give a little bit of background on the Mother Earth Delegation of United Indigenous Nations as we continue on with our program. So passing it over to you, Jyoti.
Thank you. As I said before we started our recording, the Mother Earth delegation actually came in September of last year. I was invited in as one of the about 27 delegates that had been called from indigenous leaders and spiritual leaders from around the planet to sit with a group of people that really had networks and resources and were coming together to listen to see what did Mother Nature need right now to respond to climate change. That was what brought us together. It was called Flourishing Diversity Summit, and you can Google it and find out more about it. I had been brought in to help curate the second day, which was dedicated to the Divine Mother and her waters. And on the third day, we got the news that 2.5 tons of radioactive waters from Fukushima had been put in the ocean, and more fires had been set in the Amazon. And it was like this bolt of lightning came from Mother herself down into that cup of people. And Irina Rose, who is Maori in her traditional dress, did a traditional calling to action. And in that moment, what we heard was the Mother saying it was time to declare our sovereignty, and it was time to restore the original caretaker roles back in her territories. That was imperative, that we were to stop trying to speak to those that were not listening, and we needed to focus fully and align with her direction under her nation, the Mother Earth Nation, where all nations come together through a unified process. So we're riding on the current of unification through all of this. So we tried to meet. We only had the rest of that day. Many of us were leaving the next day. At the end of it, we needed more. What came out of it? Yes, we're accepting this mission that's been handed to us. They asked myself, Loretta Afreda Bear Cook, and Irina Rose to continue the steps that would take that further. Irina unfortunately got very ill after and hasn't been able to go forward, but she did leave instructions for us, which we're following. And Loretta and I have taken it forward. The fountain was able to raise some money to have our first gathering with this intention in Stockholm, to gather the spiritual leaders of the North. And so that brought us into dialogue with the Sami and the many nations that they live in, including Russia, to come to a Stockholm Gathering that was going to happen in March. And then, of course, 1.5 weeks before that was about to happen, it was already airplane in the air. We already had everybody's visas, tickets. I mean, our new business partner who lives in Stockholm owns that hotel and was receiving us there and has established that as a place for this kind of work to happen. And then the pandemic came, the ban on travel, boom. Then the direction was take this gathering online and make it public, and this is where the delegation needs to speak to the larger public, helping them understand what this moment might be about and what the Mother Earth says is our instruction for walking through this moment, this unprecedented moment. And that brought them into the world stage. We lit up with over 33,000 viewers the first time out and counting, and we've been meeting ever since online to provide that. What will the delegation do in the end? Will they become partners? Will they be inside working this differently with us? Will they want us to hold them in a fiscal sponsorship moment, and so giving us more time as a delegation? I'm one of those delegates. We took seeds from the Flourishing Diversity Summit, those delegates that did move on with us. Then we galvanized with the North. Next, we would be going to New Zealand to galvanize the leaders of the South, the medicines and the communities of the South. And then finally, we would step onto the Eagle Condor prophecy line in North America and knock at the door. That's the kind of the instruction we're following right now, though it's taking on a very different way of forming itself and time-wise. But we'll see. But in either case, we're dedicated with this new economic model fully being turned on, are beginning to function in its new way of sharing resources and moving resources. So we're always providing what's needed in the moment the Mother Earth said, my people need this over here, then we are this over here. We're not waiting to go see if we can find the funds to do it, which puts it on a very different clock, huh? So that's what's in motion. At the same time that that's in motion, Mindahi and I started walking together, not knowing we were, in 2015, when the Mother had all the mamos call many spiritual leaders together from all the indigenous worlds together there in Colombia, and where they put in motion what the teachings were that said that the ending is falling into the beginning in 2026, and the 2026 would flow out through those organizations, individuals, and movements that were based on original principle. And that it was important to watch the ending as it fell, to stay informed, but to stay focused on that which was breaking through. So we're in a moment of that breaking through time. In 2015, Mindahi and I would come. I have pictures of us, but we didn't know each other in 2015. And so in 2013 and 2015, we would come to know each other in this life, and we would start walking together. And him and I have done a lot following the direction of the Mamos. In fact, the Mamos at this point have just activated 8 staff for the guidance of our work in the world. Out of that came that Mamos said it's time, the Earth says it's time to build these houses of original thought. And we had already gone down there with my team when we caught this template for the fountain. I had traveled with Loretta of Freda Bear Cook and some of my team to meet with the Mamos about this instruction. Was I hearing it right? Was it correct? Was it on? Should I try to activate this? Is this the right thing to be carrying? And when we got there, I was surprised to discover that there were representatives from all 4 lines of the original people there that came to meet with us to listen to this vision. And the Kogi said to me, Jyoti, where did you receive this diagram, this template that I received in my meditation? I said, well, in meditation. Why? And he said, because that's one of our oldest original symbols. That's exactly where the fountain needs to sit. We want to sit there too. And so they've been sitting on the fountain, and now we're moving into our 9th year, giving us this instruction that brings us here. When they came on with some of our friends that own, I prefer to say, care for a eco-diversity farm in Ecuador, they said, whoa, this is a holy site. We need to come for a time. So I worked with Susan and Walter there on the farm, and we were able to organize them coming in. On the 3rd time, they handed them this diagram for the House of Original Thought, which you can see a picture of there, and has a little antenna at the top, which takes everything that happens there and gives it to the heart of the world, which is the La Sierra Nevadas there in Colombia. When the House of Original Thought sits down, it recognizes the original people of that territory. It also recognizes other indigenous peoples that have migrated to that territory for one reason or another. And then it activates all nations so that we all gather around this House of Original Thought, so that the teachings of the earth can be given to all, so we can return to that way of life. They've asked for us, Fountain, that we put 13 of these Houses of Original Thought up the spine of it really follows at this point up the spine of the eagle condor. We have 3, the 3rd one's just finishing, that's in Mexico, and we have the directions now from the earth about where and when these other ones want to come. I'm sure there will be very many more as the sacred sites get revealed and the work with sacred sites really takes on. As that's happening, pagamentos are also happening. Small groups of about 11 to 12 indigenous leaders, spiritual leaders, and ceremonial peoples travel down these certain ley lines that we're given by the earth, by the mamos. And then they go to a sacred site and they hold ceremony there in order to correct something, to bring it back into health, to reactivate it, to open it up again. So these two processes are happening at the same time, which is really restoring the esoteric body of this Mother Earth, so she can breathe again. I think it's very interesting that with everything that's happening on our planet, it's all about breathing again, that we can take breath again, that we can breathe deeply into something here. She's driving this home with even the chants in our streets. So these are how these two programs inside the fountain have been primary in bringing us the direction, which then brought us into the Sacred Sites, the Sacred Territories Initiative, which Amelia's been sharing with you, and the parts of itself that are coming together right now to orchestrate the next global part of the Earth story. Pass it back to you, Amelia.
Thank you so much, Jyoti. So as you see, these are very complementary systems and initiatives that have come forward in order to support this work. It's a complementary support and a very beautiful ecosystem. So here we have our team: Jyoti Ma, Mandahi Basida, Loretta Afraid of Bear, and myself, all holding very different and very important roles. Currently, we are really intending to create and land Mandahi's seat, as well as Loretta Afraid of Bears, within the fountain, in order to make sure that we're following behind these protocols with everything that we do. And so part of their seat is really allowing this collaborative dynamic of consulting from their seat, where partners come to resource this. They are also given a space to collaborate with our initiatives and with these two incredible individuals, Mandahi and Loretta, as well. So we're very excited about that and very honored.
And if I can add one thing, Amelia, to that, is that across the board over the years, I've heard from many different tribal communities and leaders that the Black Hills stands in a very high regard with sacred site work. And when we help to convene the unity concert there in order to bring integration and a healing amongst all the 17 tribes of the Great Sioux Nation, we also came to find out that the Unity Concert provided a stage that brought Native and non-Native peoples together to stand up and for Mother Earth to unify again in peaceful motion. It also provided a platform that began to stir more awareness around how significant our sacred sites are on this earth, just like as significant as our chakra systems and points in the body have activate. If we've got those puncture, what do you call it? The right chakra points, but it's more than that.
Acupressure.
Thank you. All those acupressure points, if they're closed down, our body and our organs will close down. We won't have the same robust health that we need to move forward. And so, this is not about whether the earth will survive. This is about whether our species will survive. Mother Earth has survived and gone through 5 extinction processes before as she's evolved. She's in a 6th one right now as she's moving towards an ascension process of her own heart opening. And so these instructions help her help us, if you will. So I don't want to miss that need of interconnectedness also. So thank you, Amelia.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jyoti. And I will just add to that piece, one thing that we are currently doing within our delegation, or the Mother Earth Delegation of United Indigenous Nations, that certainly is not ours, but we are in coordination with, is allowing them to really submit their territory and the information within their territory to really understand what is needed there and follow them very deeply in what they see as the next right step and what is the current threat and how to mitigate that. So that is a part of the process that we're currently undergoing. we will share more with that as it develops and is ready for public awareness. So here we have some of our key partnerships and alliances, and of course this is very exciting to us. This is again, this is a piece that is not quite ready to share publicly, but when it is, I'm very excited to do so, and maybe we can come back on and share with this network. So currently we're in a process of a multi-stakeholder, as we call it, instead of multi-stakeholder process, of really identifying and working with all of the individuals who are really thinking through new creative, financial, legal solutions in order to follow these original principles of ancient cultures in service to sacred territories. And so there are such incredible people who have done immense work in this space, and we are looking to not do any of this work or compete in any way. It's really about collaboration at its deepest level. And so that multi-stakeholder process is very much different working groups. Currently have an operational working group, LACIEL, One Age Future, Nasigaya, around a larger global initiative for sacred territories and sacred sites protection and revitalization. We also have currently just recently launched a legal working group, which is really exciting, working with individuals from the Rights of Mother Earth Declaration for the UN, and Marie Margil, who has done some really beautiful work in really allowing for these different legal models to take precedence in order to allow the earth itself and these territories themselves to have sovereignty as legal bearing entities, which is such crucial pieces that we transition from this anthropocentric perspective into an ecocentric perspective in what we do in every way. So that's very, very exciting. And we are currently looking at forming a finance working group for individuals who and organizations who are really dedicated to this transition from, again, an anthropocentric perspective to an ecocentric perspective in the way that currency moves and how capital is utilized and deployed, and the way in which we can create more of a collaborative dynamic rather than a competitive environment within the world of capital. So it's a very exciting time, and I look forward to sharing more as these groups really take root and are open to public consumption. And in that, also a call to action for anyone who has been doing really deep work in this space. We very much always are interested in collaboration. So please be in touch with Jyoti or myself, and we can potentially give contact information for that if you are desiring or care to participate in that way. So this is a very exciting piece that is evolving. And the idea is that once these 4 working groups and the delegation being the original principles sort of holding that piece and that staff. So these 4 areas of legal, finance, operations, global initiative, movement, and original principles, once those working groups have some time to sit with one another, we would come to the table and around the fire for a full emergent experience together to really dream into what these new models can do in correlation and coordination with one another. So we're very excited about this piece. And so there's much more that I could go into here. I'll just quickly review the general framework that we're looking at, which is a very, similar to a lot of the work that many organizations have been holding for quite some time, as well as Nasigaya Alliance. And the idea is to have this area that this sacred site can be very protected. These areas are key, obviously key ecological hotspots. So very much like looking at what the protection mechanism that we can place there and allow for Indigenous assets. That is what is desired from that territory and the culture and the original peoples there.
You froze.
Can
Can you repeat what you just said?
Can you hear me now? Okay, wonderful. So again, we're very much following the original protocols of each territory. So again, this is very much up to those original peoples. But the idea is to have a protected nucleus in which these indigenous spiritual leaders would have access to these sacred sites as they've been the spiritual guardians of these areas for quite some time. And then the idea that we really have been receiving and also seems to be very universal in a lot of these different models and perspectives from many people working in this field is having an area around the sacred site that can really offer as a regenerative zone for commerce and agriculture and intercultural dialogue and education, which is really important, I think, and we believe, to the vitality of these sacred sites, that they can be both giving information and also receiving resource and understanding as this model of reciprocity that we're very dedicated to. And so this is the majority of how we will be moving as this initiative takes root and shape. So with that, I pass it over to Jyoti to add any pieces that I may have forgotten. And thank you so much for your attention.
I think you said it all. I think the one other thing that's coming up is that we are also bringing people on board like Steve Newcomb and his daughter Shauna. Some of you may have heard of Stephen's work through the film that he made. Oh, now I'm losing the name of the film. Discovery, Doctrine of
Discovery.
Doctrine of Discovery. Excuse me, my elder moments slip in more often than I'd like. But it's a film worth seeing because what Stephen has done is really reveal how the genocide got put into motion. And from that point when that happened, how land became a possession, which totally altered everything after that, right? So part of what we've been doing, for some of you may have heard, the papal bulls, that what that means is that the Pope in the late 1400s decided that he would send letters out to his minions that were going into all these new territories. And in this letter, it says that the people of those lands are less than human, and that if they cannot be brought into the church, and if they cannot give up their language and these less than human ways they have, then just kill them and take their land. And that letter is still an open doctrine that is being used still to this day to take indigenous land. So we have been working, many people, and Steve Newcomb is at the front of that, has been putting in motion. I was with the grandmothers. We were trying to get the audience with the Pope about that back then. So it's been something the indigenous world has had an initiative around, and it's worked us over the years. The latest one we helped to organize and fund, which is called the Long Walk to Rome, and Loretta Afraid Bear Cook and Steve Newcomb, along with others, went over to meet with some of the Vatican representatives of the Vatican and the Pope around rescinding the papal bulls, so that once those letters are no longer on the record, we can heal something that's at the deep cut, and we need to go back there to be able to restore a lot of things. So that's in motion as well through this. And what Stephen likes to bring into to us for our mindfulness study is that the language that's coming out of colonization is what locks us all in the box. And so his daughter has received a new way of coding us called the reverence codes, so that once we see how this dynamic of our language locks us into the box, then we have to catch it, like consumption might be, well, I need to digest. I need to, it's an integrative process. It's a awakening process rather than a process where we go into dig for something, or we go into, in the Amazon, they call the Western people the ants, because wherever, oh, termites, because wherever they go, they eat things up along their trail. They consume. So we're looking at languaging as well, in all the way that we're making our contracts with each other, our waking possible agreements with each other, our understandings with each other. Let's rename some of these things so we literally are unhooking from the box of colonization with every step we take towards these initiatives. So I just want to add that it's part of what's stirring in this too. So you can see there's a whole system, ecosystem, that's coming up out of an emerging process that we're in, with people like yourselves that are ready to sit at the table with that thread of their own originality that they've been caring for and being cared for by, to see what the weaving's going to be. So it's kind of an exciting moment.
Absolutely. I want to thank you so much for that presentation. There's just so much rich things, material that you're working with. And I love the collaboration piece. I think that's what we really need to do more of going forward in the world today. And, we really
Absolutely.
resonate with some of the things you were saying. I think one point of clarity I'd like to have for the network is the sacred sites. Are they already established? Have there's projects begun where there's certain territories that you can, like, say, we're working in Ecuador or we're working in the Black Hills in the USA? Has that been begun, or is that just still in theory?
Yeah, and like I said at the top of the call, this work is very much a continuation of work that has been happening for decades. So many of our collaborative partners, as well as our Indigenous relatives and relations, have been working in their territories for their entire lives. Like Loretta Afraid of Bear, as we've mentioned, her entire life has been dedicated to the Black Hills, and she has done some of the most beautiful work there. So it is continuation, certainly. And yes, there are territories that we are very much focused on. And I think the Black Hills, as far as we understand and see it, are some of the most important biocultural territory to really focus on, because it symbolizes and signifies something so profound for many nations, many Indigenous nations across the globe. So that is certainly something that we're currently focused on. But as I've mentioned, we're really going to the delegation, the Mother Earth delegation, and really asking them, where are these territories? What is of the most importance, to the original peoples there, and really understanding what is priority, to really look at what are the areas that are most threatened currently, what do they need, where are the sacred sites, just doing a bit more of a landscape mapping of what those currently are. Because again, we can go, we have access to so many sites and so many databases of sacred sites that need protection, but we're really focusing again so deeply on Indigenous led and following Indigenous protocols that we need to go to them. And it's a much different process than if you're going to Stanford and asking for their resources and databases on what are the most key ecological biodiversities. Very different process. You have to go and offer, you go through the process of the right spiritual protocol of offering and receiving from the elders. And so it's a very, very different process. And I think some would say it's a slower process, but I think in the long run, it is much more effective and efficient, because you're following that protocol. So that's where we currently are, and we're in the process of mapping and really listening, deep listening.
I absolutely love that you include that. I think that the reverence piece is something that we don't do in the Western world, and it's very, very much needed. So I'm so,
Yeah, because if you go to an area and you say, oh, you have X amount of baseload carbon and we're going to protect it in this way, and that means that no one's allowed on this land, and the people who have been holding these pieces of years and
You're frozen.
say,
Her Wi-Fi goes in
Sorry
and out.
about that. And we just say, oh, well, this is how we're going to do it. But it's really about understanding what that land itself needs and what the peoples there are really saying. So that's how we are very, very different than most conservation projects that I've worked with in the past.
Let me ask you, is there a website that people in our network could come and learn about this, or a contact information that you want to share?
Yeah, I would say the fountain.earth is the website that we is the Fountain website, and that has information on the delegation and their meetings. The Sacred Territories Initiative is something that we're sharing with close collaborative partners currently, and we will be updating the website with the initiative likely very soon. But again, it's such a collaborative process that it's not that the fountain is the only one working in this way. It's very much about the ecosystem. And so as we map the ecosystem, and we're in the process, as I mentioned, of mapping the ecosystem and creating a taxonomy of each organization and initiative, what their niche and function is, we're likely going to, once it is of appropriate time to have an external facing presentation of that, we will likely be creating a landing page in which we will show the map of the ecosystem and the taxonomy.
That sounds very much like the kind of work that my colleague here, Susie, has been working on, and she could probably speak more in depth too. Is there something that you wanted to add to the questions before we wrap up the recorded portion of the call, or Susie?
I think the only thing that comes to mind is that that so many different Indigenous groups have been under such direct threat at the moment. So there's just that sort of feeling of caution of putting things online because of the reality that we're dealing with across the world under the blanket of COVID. So but I am fascinated, and I really look forward to hearing more.
Yeah, I so agree with you, and I think that that's very wise. And this work is sacred, and a lot of that means that you have, at least I speak for myself, I proceed with such caution because the nature of the work, and when you create something that is public and allowed for public sharing, it's beautiful and can be quite catalytic, but it also needs a level of protection. And so it's this balance point between full collaboration and allowing the sacred work to be held in reverence. And so we're dancing between these two places, I would say, in our work, and that's the beauty of it. We're really learning a new way of operating and asking for patience and forgiveness in our humility as we learn collectively together. So I would say that much, and want to pass it over to Jyoti if she has any thoughts on that.
Oh, thank you, Amelia. And I think what comes to mind, is that what we are discovering, because we started gathering funds for COVID to help our Indigenous communities, because what we discovered was there's like this blanket that's laid down over them because there's this aggressive energy that's coming after them right now, not providing them with, we had a lot of relief funds that were given from the government to relieve them. Hardly any of those funds were ever received. Where'd they go? They've got a different kind of situation unfolding for them, and it brings up also, and this is my projection into the story, but for me it certainly did, of what happened when the blankets with smallpox came to town. So it's a very similar kind of activity that's happening under the blanket, so they can move these out the original people, because they want those those last of our sustaining ecosystem. They want it for extraction. So there is a time element inside of all of this for me, which means we have to trust our process as she brings it to us. We have to trust that everybody and everything that's necessary for putting a protective kind of motion in front of that kind of activity can happen sooner than later, because she says to me, you know, the alignment to my nation is what everybody's focus needs to be on right now. I will give you the instructions where we walk next. And so it's not about coming out of that extractive model of economy to market what we need. This is about following a process and honoring the sacredness of it, knowing she will bring what she needs to this process. We are here to serve that need and to stay fully in alignment with that principle and with the original cord that generates life and sustains life in its place. So I think that that's also part of the work we're about, is helping to find that new rhythm, that new way of carrying. And the fountain has been doing this for 9 years now. That's how we arrived at your table today, by following that kind of instruction. I didn't have a marketing plan. I didn't have a business plan. We didn't get here that way. I'm not putting that piece down, because certainly we are trying to see how we can bring some of those pieces in that are good for communication amongst us all, to organize ourselves in this collaborative, very diverse collaboration that's unfolding here, and the honoring of that diversity. So
Thank you so much. It's really fascinating, and I'm looking forward to all that's going to come from this. It's so needed, and it's so beautiful to hear that it exists and is growing. And we look forward to seeing what potentially TreeSisters can do with you. So thank you again for your time.
thank you.
Thank you. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for your work.